I'm Daniel. Thanks for coming. We're going to talk today about AI and audit. So we don't have a lot of slides. It's going to be quick. If you want to get to the slides, you can go to this URL, get the slides. Don't have to take pictures. I'm going to tell you a teeny tiny bit about what is the topic, the problem, the solution, some use cases. Let's talk about it. So in every big company, you have a function called internal audit. In Hebrew, that would be bikorat pnimi. And what are they doing? They're checking stuff to make sure the organization is, maintaining quality, following the rules, doing compliance. The trouble is it's a hard job for humans to do, to correlate. It says something on page 15 and page 3000 of a lot of reports. People are asked to do this job that people are not very good at. It's a good starting point. So when internal audit doesn't realize something's bad, very bad things can happen in an organization. They're supposed to catch stuff, and it's hard to catch stuff. So the way that an organization is structured, you have the people on the left who are just doing their job following the rules. Then you have the people who are doing the checking. They're very focused. They're like the second line of defense. And then you have the internal audit department that they're the big thinkers. They think broad, and they think about compliance and governance and what should the rules be, not just checking the rules. And they all report up to the executive to make sure the company is functioning. So ostensibly, this is how big companies work, and governments and stuff. So the customer for us is people like risk managers, internal audit departments that have to follow these processes that are hard to follow for anybody because there's no good tool. So you go to a building of Ernst & Young and it's full of people and they're doing this job that's hard. And they could use some help. So relevant standards to think about are ISO, COSO, these different internal audit standards that they're following. The way it works is you do what you say and you say what you do. Trouble is it takes a lot of effort. So example that this is not made up, Six Group has an install of our platform that they have to watch lots of money in the stock exchange. They're the Swiss stock exchange. And they have lots of rules. And they have to figure out, are we following these rules? What didn't we think of? What are we not talking about? And so this is like a real problem in big enterprise. In little enterprise, in tiny business, you just read the reports, no big deal. But when you have 500,000 employees, it becomes unmanageable to do. So I picked an example from Israel, why not? Humans processing text, bad. It's not a scalable process. Just like earlier speaker was talking about, translation is not scalable. Similarly, human analysis of infinity documents is not a reasonable task. So going down to more specific, there's actually a bunch of sub-problems. It's not just one problem, it's like a bunch of problems. You're not aware of trends. If I give you a big stack of documents and say here, they're organized by year, it's hard to realize in one specific topic what's happening over time. Even with Control F, if it's all digital, it's hard. The other problem is human bias. I'm in IT, so I think IT risks are big, but maybe an HR person doesn't even know about IT risks and they view HR risks as important. So you would think that computers would have bias, but actually people have bias. We also have this problem of language, where Six Group, for example, all the documents are in German. They're not in English. And so we have this multilingual thing going on that in a large organization, different reports are in different languages. And so aggregating that up becomes hard. We also have this unacceptable, crazy phenomenon of sampling that's standard across the whole industry in internal audit, where they say, I'm going to read the titles of the reports that I'm going to sample because I don't have enough resources to actually read all the reports. And that's kind of admitting failure already. And then within the sampled reports, they're going to sample, do Control F and search. So there's not full coverage, and you don't know what wasn't talked about if you don't do full coverage. You also can't see things quickly, so they have an annual audit meeting in a company, which is kind of crazy. If it's September 9th, and they're 9/11 is going to be soon, no one's going to read about it for a year if they audit that program. So there's lots of problems in detail. The solution is to use more automation to take the tasks that the people are doing and build models that do those tasks to help them do their job. It's not really to replace people, it's just to achieve a thing that's currently not being achieved, which is more coverage of documents just to understand what's in them. And to see risks, that's their job, is to find problems and fix them before they have like a financial impact. If you only look at where did I lose money, the game is over, you lost. The idea is to prevent, before you lose the money, to go like, oh, I have this procedure, it's stupid, I shouldn't be doing that. So there's a workflow where you start with documents, they get ingested, you end up with some business report. Often it's like for an agenda, so like, I need more money for internal compliance, here's my evidence. Control F for evidence, but not with Control F. So, example use case, this topic is called enterprise risk management. You have some sentence, like employees seem to be unaware of the difference between confidential and anonymous. And what you want is the platform to pluck out that sentence out of a bajillion sentences and go, oh, somebody wrote down this was a problem, we should think about it. It's that simple. The problem is that there's not one sentence, there's a bajillion sentences. So, and it also happens in Hebrew, and the translation doesn't have the same classification, and different models are involved, and so it gets involved. There's also thresholding, where you say like, what's the level of confidence you have that it's a risk before I report it that it's a risk? So there's also relabeling, because don't necessarily believe the machine. There are lots of issues. What's really happening inside is you have some input to a bunch of models that's common. So what you're seeing here for COBIT 5, for example, this is inside our platform. We take the text, we transform it into an embedding format, like we process the text into numbers, and then we have a whole bunch of models that each of them takes the same input but predicts some other thing. We have a bunch of different labels, often trained on different data, and what we do is we take the standard, like COBIT 5, and we say, okay, what's the labels that it's saying that the humans have to follow and use their highlighter to create? And we're like, okay, I can make a model to do that. Now the problem is that you need a data set. So you have to have like people at keyboards to make the data set. But the idea is actually relatively straightforward. You go like, what's a risk, what's a control, what's a sentence that indicates one of those things? And then once you have them, you say, okay, I have another model that says, now that it's a risk, what kind of risk is it? Is it harm to individuals? Is it behavior? What is it? And it's not one or the other. It could be all these labels. So moving right along, you don't just want to know what's a risk. They actually don't know across departments who's saying the same stuff. And so you want some kind of semantic representation to say, I reported a risk with these words, but that guy using completely different words, maybe in his paradigm, also was talking about risk. Hey, wow, we have convergence here. Often you'll see that between years, people copy-paste in their report that goes uphill the same stuff. And so you want to find repeated risk and go like, nah, actually like do effort. Don't just like give me a report. But they don't notice, because it's hard to put 10 years of reports together and figure out what's a repeated risk. And so this kind of simple semantic representation can be very useful for understanding the documents, just putting them in context. You also want to see, not just like, here's a sentence, I put a label on it. You want to know the context within the document. So what you're seeing here is a user interface that says, I have a sentence. Let me show you, user, if you click on that sentence, what came before and after, so you can understand, like, what are they talking about? What was the issue? And if you want, you can pop open the document, look at find similar statements. So it's a like practical workflow for trying to figure stuff out. This is the user interface for seeing things across time. If you want to see in a very specific search, let's say fraud, what's the trending issues in fraud in my company? You can do that by dumping in all the documents and then picking a keyword or a key phrase. And it will semantically look through all the documents to make you this graph live in front of you. And that's really, really hard to do as humans, but really easy to do for the computer. So it motivates the use case a lot. There's also a standard process in risk management called a risk control matrix, where you're trying to find risks are the rows and controls are the columns, and you're trying to match up, like, I plucked these risks and these controls and put them into a bucket, and I want to see like what controls mitigate this risk. And if you see no controls, you go like, oh, we have a problem. Or similarly, you can find controls that are in place since the 80s, they're just there, and there's no risk anymore, but they're still there. People are still doing the process, they don't think too hard about their job, and you go, wow, we're spending a lot of money like doing a thing that's not protecting us from anything. What a waste. So this is like an evidence collection tool that we put in to help people find stuff. And along the way, we've seen some very domain-specific, cool stuff. First of all, data. So we're using data collection stuff. Some of you here in the audience have seen it yourself. And so the issue in this area is that there's not good data. You have to just go get your own data. You need like accountants and auditors at keyboards making you data. Similarly, transfer learning doesn't work well between verticals, so you have to do tricks, you have to be careful. Out of vocabulary is an issue because people use their own custom lingo in their vertical. If you're an aircraft manufacturer, you're going to be talking about parts and maintenance records and stuff that normal English doesn't have. So there's a customization process for these models. And that's the big picture, that like you have a generic architecture that understands risk within the context of the regulation, and you can apply it for lots of different use cases. That's all we got.